Thank you, member. Recognizing the member for Saanich North and the Islands.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be the designated speaker for the BC Green Caucus here. Today, I'll be building on the comments that I made in my response to the throne speech, where I highlighted the importance of the government to honor and respect the processes of this legislative assembly. Each process is a necessary step leading to the next one. Skipping steps makes it difficult for the public, media, and importantly, the members in this assembly, members of the opposition, to hold the government accountable. The point of the speech from the throne is to clearly lay out the vision, objectives, and goals of the government, so that when we take the next step to the budget, we can see the choices government has made to achieve their stated vision. These are the building blocks of democratic accountability. If respected, the processes of this assembly can produce an effective, dare I say, efficient, governing body that creates systems which produces services for all the people. It is timely for us in this chamber to consider democracy and autocracy. Democracy means the power or authority is in the people. Autocracy means the power or authority is in the self or individual. We have agreed that we exist in a democracy. To advance our collective interest, this government was organized over a matter of hundreds of years. A series of checks and balances was created to regulate against the dangerous concentration of power of the people into an individual or a small group of individuals. For this institution to function properly, there must be a healthy, respectful tension between the government and the opposition. The government must not use their temporary access to this concentration of power and authority to limit the opposition from using tools they have to provide effective oversight of the government. Nor should the government interfere or obstruct the opposition's ability to enforce the accountability of the government. One of the highest values to be protected in this assembly is truth-telling. Without transparency, the credibility and integrity of the entire democratic institution is in question. Concentrating power and authority is incredibly tempting for humans. We are witnessing the terrible and tragic events of the unquenchable thirst to gain and maintain power right now in Europe. I think this is one of the reasons why it's troubling to hear any member of this assembly openly desire a majority government, or to suggest that the only way this assembly can work well is if there is an unhealthy concentration of power and authority, because that is fundamentally antithetical to the proper functioning of this institution. Majorities are the goal of another entity that lurks in the halls of this assembly: political parties. The goal of a democracy is to ensure that power and authority remains distributed and out of the reach of individuals or small groups of individuals, while political parties are that workaround. All the members of this assembly should be in service to our constituents who elect us. Unfortunately, political parties pursue power and refocus the efforts of this institution. They create a four-year partisan race to see who can advance their own selfish interest, not those of our constituents. Autocracy, not democracy. As the stewards of democracy, who are all part of a political party, the members in this assembly should always be vigilant and balance the interests of the people we serve with the aspirations of our political parties. Remember when the Premier went to the Lieutenant Governor's house to request an election? Remember when the Premier told British Columbians that they needed to elect a majority government to get anything done in this assembly? I don't think the person who said those words will fashion themselves as an autocrat. However, the core of those words is autocratic. In the summer of 2020, the Premier moved to concentrate more power into his office by gaining an overwhelming majority of seats for his political party. Indeed, the BC NDP captured 65% of the seats of this assembly with only 47% of the popular vote. However, it's worse. Only 54.5% of eligible voters in British Columbia voted in the 2020 election. So essentially, the BC NDP secured 47% of the 54% of the voters who voted. It is an astounding accomplishment, really, that basically 1/4 of the BC voters yielded a consolidation of power where the Premier enjoys an automatic confidence of 65% of the seats in this assembly. No questions asked. These are obedient votes. That's precisely why the BC Green Caucus expended so much energy in our fight for proportional representation, and why I believe that minority governments are an essential component to a regulated, healthy distribution of power and authority in our democratic assembly. Unfortunately, this BC NDP government, under this Premier and his Chief of Staff, are increasingly autocratic. Despite long consultation, community, and stakeholder engagements, many who participate in these NDP processes describe them as exercises in futility. They go away feeling unheard, bitter, frustrated. This government is increasingly top-down, paternalistic, autocratic, call it whatever suits you. Their approach is subverting our democracy. Autocrats control the flow of information through the use of propaganda and political rhetoric. They are the most powerful tools autocrats use to preserve power and authority. A troubling sign of an increasingly brazen autocratic government is the use of the public purse to control the message they want heard and to limit the access of the opposition, media, and public to vital information they need to do their job. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, I have seen numerous accounts of reporters complaining about the very small room that ministers of the Crown are now going to make their announcements, with no access to the media to ask questions. This propaganda is a powerful tool to control the narrative and confuse. It does not matter that life is not more affordable under this BC NDP government. Repeat it anyway, and eventually everyone, including the official opposition apparently, begin chasing the message. It is at that point that we are no longer debating what is actually going on, but rather chasing each other around in a constructed alternate reality, basically a simulation. So when it comes to the annual budget, it takes weeks and months for the opposition, media, special interest organizations, academics, and economists to cut through the rhetoric, cut through the noise that government has created to pitch their budget, to find out what is in the hundreds of pages dumped on the table in the form of the Minister of Finance's speech, presentation, the budget and fiscal plan, budget highlights, estimates, supplement to the estimates, ministry service plans, and Crown agency service plans. It's important to get past the slogan, making life more affordable for British Columbians, referenced endlessly in question period, government communications, and this budget. Rhetoric like Stronger BC is a powerful way to simply communicate complexity. So if the Cabinet's goals and objectives are to, quote, make life more affordable, the budget should show us how they are making life more affordable. This BC NDP government has been consistently building on this making life more affordable narrative for several years now. Don't be confused if your life is not more affordable. The point is not necessarily to make life more affordable, but to repeat it often enough that you believe that your life has indeed become more affordable. It's as if the more you say our lives are more affordable, that it will overwhelm the bitter taste of the growing, unsustainable, and unaffordable cost of our basic needs, shelter, food, and fuel, and our consumptive wants that are increasingly out of reach for most people. Answers to questions about why the revenue that all the spending in this budget is predicated on are actions that are detrimental to the stated outcomes of making life more affordable. Those answers will never be forthcoming.